Beverly Hills. Welcome to my show, Fusion of Science and Beauty. And as you know, my passion for bringing out the awareness of integrative medicine, anti-aging, regenerative medicine, nutrigenomic medicine. This is all about an awareness because this is the next way of how we're going to heal ourselves back. It includes integrative medicine, includes homeopathy, it includes so many ways of healing. And all I'm trying to say is that there's other ways to heal our bodies other than just conventional medicine. It's not to say that that's not a necessary medicine, but we need to integrate all methods of healing to achieve an optimal result in our health. And today I've got a fabulous, she's actually the host of the show today. Her name is Brandy Vaughn. She's a founder of LearnTheRisk.org. It's a platform which I've been very, very happy to say that she's asked me to be a part of. And that platform is to bring about awareness of all of what really the pharmaceutical drugs, the dangers of the pharmaceutical drugs. She'll tell you more about it. But she is actually here to interview me because I am, for the first time, coming public with my story. It's a story that I've held within me for almost 4.5 years. And it has devastated my family life. It is, I've gone through a lot, and it's time to tell my story. So, Brandy, thank you so much.
Yes.
This is going to be a little unique.
Yes. Well, thank you. I'm Brandy Vaughn, and I run LearnTheRisk.org. I'm also a pharmaceutical whistleblower. I used to work in pharma, and I saw the corruption from the inside. And Dr. Naina has an amazing story of that firsthand that people need to hear. So I am honored today to be interviewing you as a guest host and really hearing your story, because people who are coming out are being targeted, and your story of being targeted is very, very important, and people need to understand what's going on behind the scenes. And that, I feel like, is part of our bigger mission in life, to create transparency for things that are going on behind the scenes that the public may not know about. Yeah. So, Dr. Naina, thank you for sharing your story today. I know it's hard, especially when we're targeted and our lives don't really look the same after that.
They're never the same.
Tell me how it started.
Yeah. And you know, before I start the story, my purpose in telling the story is not just to, vent. It is really a call to action, because it is a story because I need to, just as you expose some of the dangers of the pharma companies and so forth, I need to expose some of the dangers of the state medical boards and their totalitarian rule that they have over doctors. Because it's only when we free and the doctors can practice without fear of their licenses will they make the right decisions for the health freedom that we are so talking about. That is another avenue that needs to be addressed. And I want to expose how all of these are all kind of related back to pharma again. And so that's really my purpose. It's not really just about my venting my story. Believe me, that's not the purpose. But hear my story, because if you can see how one doctor has gone through so much, and I made it without a drink, without any drugs, without anything. It was a lot of meditation and a lot of faith, okay? And a lot of awareness, and knew that I had to do the right thing. And that's why I feel like I'm being connected with the right people now, and I think this is the time to tell my story.
And we are honored to hear it. It's a very important one.
Thank you. So my story started, I had a fabulous practice in Oregon, Lake Oswego, Oregon. It's sort of the Beverly Hills of California. I was an anti-aging, regenerative, integrative doctor. My clinic was called Advanced Aesthetics and Integrative Medical Center, and I was the talk of the town. It was just I was able to get a lot of client patients that were on many different medications, and I was able to lower their medications. So in a way, I was taking business away from the gynecologist because I was doing bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. I teach that. I learned a way of just doing it very low dose, physiological replacement, very safe. So it brought back a lot of quality of life for a lot of men and women. I then also had an aesthetic practice. I was taking business away from the dermatologist because I had unique ways of combining, laser treatments, because as we sometimes kill the fat cells, we know that stores the toxins. So I had ways to address that, and those gave a lot of success. I also took business away from the pain management doctors, because many of these patients would come in on very high doses of pain medication, sleeping medication, and muscle relaxants, and I would start to take them down as I balanced, through a functional medicine approach. So having said that, there was a lot of, and then also a lot of heart doctors had patients who were on statin drugs, and we would sometimes balance things, and the cholesterols would come down. My credibility goes to, in 2008, I was asked, I went into a surprise interview. Procter & Gamble asked me to endorse the Olay Regenerist line. And so the launch was in Dubai. And I think a multi-billion-dollar company would know what kind of a person I am. Very credible. I asked them, I said, you want me to endorse this product? How come you're not asking a plastic surgeon or a dermatologist? They said, we know that we want an anti-aging expert. And I, by that time, completed a board certification in anti-aging and regenerative medicine by the A4M. It's not recognized specialty. Obviously, we're fighting for that, so it's not recognized yet. And at that point, they told me one thing that I remember. They said, the anti-aging people are going to spend $1 trillion healing themselves back to wellness. Well, that's the same thing that I told you in another show that we did. Right. Pilsner said the same thing. So that really stuck in my mind, and I became very successful. The product became #1 in 1 year, which was an amazing thing. I came back to my clinic. I had a lot of girls working for me. They're, it's an aesthetic clinic. They're all very pretty, and just, it was a very, very fun, very nice clinic. And I found out that there was unprofessional behavior by a manager of mine. And I called my attorney.
Your office manager.
My office manager. And I called my attorney, and he said that she had a felon record. She had 3 names, and you need to terminate her. And so I did. He was there, and I terminated her. And I found, but something sent, because there was Class C felonies and all this kind of stuff, and it's all public knowledge, so I'm allowed to talk about it. Class C felonies, and there was, some Class C felonies involving some forgings and things like that. I started to think. So one of the girls in my office brought to my attention that she was forging prescriptions, and there was, I asked my nurse practitioners to forge prescription. We have a document expert that shows that those prescriptions had been forged. So I filed a police report, like you should, and the police report was before I realized. Several weeks later, I was being asked by the board to do a drug test and to show and suddenly my inventory logs weren't correct. And I'm like, I was the only one who knew that my inventory logs were, you have to have these handwritten logs, but I knew that those inventory logs were DA compliant because my computer system was DA compliant. I was far ahead of the curve. Right. And so I never worried about it, but I was the only one who knew that fact, not the other girls. So I knew somebody in my office had said that to the board. And sure enough, the story goes on that the investigator decided to told the police to drop the investigation on her when we filed the police report, and to turn it on me. And
so this is investigator. Which investigator?
The Oregon State Medical Board.
Okay.
And so the Oregon State Medical Board chose to go after investigating me. I've never done drugs in my life. I was asked to drug test, do a hair analysis test. I was obviously in shock because I've never had a patient complaint. None of my issues rose from patient harm. There was no fraudulent thing, although they tried to get the DEA. There was no criminal charges. There's no fraud. Every agency investigated me. There was nothing.
So how did the investigation start with the board?
The investigators started, because apparently this girl told another girl to go and say that I was doing illegal things in my office, and I was on drugs. And I was on cocaine and heroin.
After you filed a police report against her?
Yes.
Okay.
And that didn't, of course, the investigator wouldn't think to drug test her, right? Who was forging prescriptions or anything, wouldn't drug test her. And the report was dropped. The police report was dropped due to lack of evidence. I couldn't believe it. And suddenly, the light was on me. And I cooperated, but I made a blunder of my life. I trusted this legal system. And the legal system, I got the best attorney, I thought, to handle this. She said, give up your license, surrender your license till this is over. And I said, okay. I figured it was 2 weeks.
Even though you'd done nothing wrong.
I'd done nothing
you
wrong.
passed all
and
the
I didn't
drug
know.
tests. Everything was on board. And clear.
Everything was on board. And I didn't know that when you surrender a license in the medical world, that it's an admission of guilt. I didn't know that it could be taken as admission of guilt. See, I didn't know these things because I've never been in the situation.
And you trusted the advice
25
you were
years
being given.
Yes, and 25 years, I've never had attorneys. I've never had to, I just never had an issue with any, I never had patient complaints. So I gave up my license, and then it went on a fishing expedition. So at the time that I was asked to surrender my license, there was no probable cause because I drug tested clean. My inventory logs were computer compliant and the DA compliance system. If, let's just say if they weren't, why wouldn't they just find me? Why would they go on to investigate me and not investigate the manager?
They were probably making an example of you.
So this is why I bring this up, because my charts weren't even reviewed. In the hearing, it came out that the expert witnesses, first of all, wasn't an anti-aging expert witness. She was in internal medicine. I don't even do internal medicine. Every one of my chart notes said, I'm approaching this patient with an integrative and functional medicine point of view. But they wanted to get me on an integrative thing, like a pill-popping doctor. And I'm like, I take people off medicines. I don't put people on medicines. So I showed that this happened to me.
You'd also been very outspoken.
I was
think
very outspoken.
We need to cover that as well.
Yes.
You were very outspoken against some of the conventional
vaccines
medicine.
and conventional medicine. I did not follow standards of care because I was outside of the standards of care. I was taking people off medication. I was taking all of these things happening that people just were getting better. And there's no standard of care for that.
And you became a well-known voice for that when you became a spokesperson for Procter & Gamble. And then all of a sudden you have an air of celebrity, shall we say, and you were speaking out against the medical community, pharmaceutical companies, which are running the medical community.
I did. Many companies would stop, and many of the pharma companies would come in, and they would see that I was stocking less and less of their samples. And I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I know that they didn't leave very happy a lot of times. And so but that's how I did it. And then suddenly at that point, so my charts weren't even looked at until much later. So at the time I was asked to surrender my license, I didn't even know what what had happened, so I could even have a chance to defend myself. I didn't even know what the allegations were. Because as far as I was concerned, I drug tested clean, my inventory logs were fine. If you really wanted the handwritten and not the computer ones, which were totally fine, then fine me or do something else. But why are you going on trying to revoke me? So I brought this here. This is from the Oregon Medical Board 2012 public quarterly meeting. Senator Bates and Senator Steiner Hayward had concerns. They had serious concerns that there was no due process being given to certain physicians. Isn't that a violation of due process when certain physicians are being targeted? They had a whole meeting. I want you guys to look at these tapes because I'm not making this up. This is an actual transcript copy of the videotapes, and you can YouTube it under Oregon State Medical Board hearing in October of 2012. And it clearly goes on to say that. I showed this to my attorneys, but you know what? I wanted to try to see if I could sue the girl that made that, but it didn't happen. And I know we're coming to a break.
Those transcripts are going to be online, and we'll be right back with Dr. Naina and her story.
This is NainaMD, Fusion of Science and Beauty.
Hi, welcome back. I'm Brandy Vaughn, and I'm interviewing today Dr. Naina on her show as a guest host, as Dr. Naina shares her story with us. One of the key things that we need to back up and cover again is that you had taken on a role as spokesperson for a large company. You and your opinions were being spotlighted, right?
Yes.
And so ultimately the investigation began as a bit of a revenge from your office manager who you had filed criminal charges against. Yeah. But then the investigation took on a mind of its own, a life of its own, because you were a very well-known, very outspoken person, a doctor, against the conventional medical system in some ways. You know, we all know it needs its place, but you were really pushing an idea of health that doesn't have conventional medicine at its base. And as we know, the medical system in the U.S. and pharmaceutical companies really do not like that. So why do you think the Medical Board of Oregon was investigating you? Why did they continue that investigation?
Well, I think the Oregon State Medical Board has these guidelines, and I didn't follow in any of their guidelines. There's also, the investigators. I was a high-profile doctor, but integrative, so it was a perfect environment to really probably target me and to make me an example. So I think if they made me an example, then all the other doctors that would even think of doing what I did and to reach the stature that I did wouldn't want to do it. So I think it was to discourage that.
Because their license might be at stake and their career and ultimately some of the way that they live their life, their lifestyle.
And I think that's really the point I want to make. It's not really my story. I think it's the fact that the state medical boards have this absolute totalitarian power, because I could only fight my case in an administrative law. When an administrative law judge, the findings of fact, they can do anything. In my case, without any kind of criminal charges. I have doctors, for example, that have killed patients, doctors who've had sex with patients. They don't get revocation orders that are like maybe 40 pages. I had a 149-page revocation order. Probably one of the few doctors, if not the only doctor in the country that has had that much of a revocation order for what did I do? Right. And so definitely the Oregon State the state medical boards, they hold a lot of power. It's almost abuse. They can abuse it. It's right. At their will. And they control the doctors. And
the board controls the doctors. Who controls the medical board?
So this is what I wanted to talk. The state medical boards is controlled by the Federation of the State Medical Board. Now, the Federation of the State Medical Board, everyone thinks is really doing the right thing, and they're nonprofit, and they're just supposed to be just watching over and setting the proper guidelines.
So supposed to be independent.
Supposed to be independent. No, because I have today a document right here that this was on May 8th, 2012. Very interesting, the same year that I was targeted, that this is the United States Senate Committee on Finance. This is the Senator Grassley and Max Baucus. They're the chairman. And they wrote a letter to Dr. Humayun Chody, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Federation of the State Medical Boards. And the letter states that they wanted to know exactly where they received their money from. And what had happened is that Purdue set a guidelines which they adopted, and Dr. Fishman, who is part of the Federation of the State Medical Boards, also received money to write a book called Opioid Prescribing. And that was on oxycodone. And we found out later that that was terrible. It was like people became so addicted, it was horrible. And so they were investigated to the ties, and they found out that $100,000 had been received by the Federation of the State Medical Boards from a drug pharma company.
So the Federation of Medical Boards
It's not independent.
Is meant to be independent. It's a nonprofit. People think that it's outside of the industry.
These are all the documents, yeah.
And clearly it's not. They were taking consulting fees probably and money from the pharmaceutical companies.
And there was a book they received to write. They claimed that they took the money to write a book called Opioid Prescribing, so they could give that as a standard for guidelines for the doctors. Well, now when they found out that the Joint Commission is now investigating them, they took a 180-degree turn, and now they started going after the doctors who were prescribing what they were
suggesting,
what they were supposed to follow. And now the doctors are so worried about, they're being hounded, they're being targeted. So many of them are being suspended, and they're paying fines, and many are getting licenses revoked. But in my case, my case was because I chose to fight, and I was punished for that. Because how dare I go against a state medical board?
How dare you question?
How dare I question? And there's a constitutional law. If you're revoked in one state, then you get revoked in another state. So I had a license in California, and I came here to practice. And Oregon, so now I had an accusation here because I was revoked in Oregon. So they're saying, okay, it's a constitutional law, you need to get revoked. But I went before the judge, and I'm very happy to say that I set a precedent case, and I'm thankful for California State Medical Board. I think it's amazing that they actually took a decision on their own, because they said, no, we're not going to revoke her license. That means they must have seen something.
Right.
So they did not revoke my license, and I took the term that I will not practice for 6 months because obviously they could probably be in violation of not following the constitutional law, and I took that, and I was very transparent about it, and I'm taking that deal because I think that that's a way for me to show that I'm going to keep my end of the bargain, because they've been so nice to, understand what I've gone through.
Well, you might say nice. I would say they saw through the veil of what happened in Oregon. Yes. And they saw that you were being targeted. I mean, there were no real reasons to revoke your license in Oregon.
No, there was not. They revoked based on 2 text messages and some a continuity of care issue on 5-HTP. And if somebody lowered the dose of a medicine, I said, yeah, I let her know to do that, meaning my nurse practitioner. Nothing was even defined. That's not even practicing medicine.
They were scourging everything, trying to find a reason and find things to pin against you, which clearly it was because you were targeted in some way. And it was clearly because you were speaking out against the conventional medical system in a lot of different ways, and your voice was becoming more powerful.
And you can't stop it. You can't stop integrated medicine. There's already a board forming as we speak. And the more, I think it's malpractice for the doctors not to have knowledge. And I think that I will hopefully one day be able to get a relationship with the California Medical Board where they'll come to me and say, hey, you know what, this is an integrated thing. Should we or should we not do that? And I would absolutely, cooperate. That's why I want full transparency. That's the purpose of doing the show here, because I really want to be fully transparent, because I've suffered in ways that, and you know what it's like to be targeted. My father died in disbelief of his daughter ever having to go through anything like this. He knew the integrity that I held. He knew all of that. And for his sake, for my family's sake, my mother she doesn't keep well. I know what she's gone through. And I know what my sister is going through, taking care of my mother when I should be participating in that while I'm fighting my battles. I know my whole family, the devastation that's happened.
And I think that we really have to have hope that the system will recognize integrative and functional medicine more and more, because our current system of healthcare is broken. Not keeping us healthy.
A broken system.
It's broken.
And the legal system is
completely broken.
The legal help that I tried to get to fight my case was so corrupt. I mean, the attorney wanted to bleed me for money. He wanted to make my case so convoluted so that I wasn't even represented properly. I found out that he'd been lying to me, never even called the board to even try to negotiate.
Right.
So there is so many factors. It's the legal system that's broken. It's the medical system.
And in some areas, the state medical boards as well. That falls down to that. And doctors who speak out are targeted. And
Oregon State Medical Board was even investigated. Here is the senators themselves having concerns the same year. And I don't understand how they're allowed, how are state medical boards allowed to have absolute power over doctors. You can ruin their lives just by, they have the authority to do anything. Any attorney that I consulted, and I consulted 50 to try to help me fight the system, and they said, you're never going to win. You're just going to get your license revoked, which is exactly what happened. And they said, don't even try to go further, because I wanted to go for a writ of certiorari, which is abuse of administrative law. They said, you know what, the Supreme Court even won't take you, because this is the system. They have absolute control. Wow. And if they're having control, and the reason I bring this in my show is that you're trying to fight for the vaccine and the health freedom, but if the doctors don't have the freedom to make the right choice, because they are being held in fear, they're not going to want to go through what I went through.
Right.
No doctor is going to want to go through 4.5 years to what I went through.
Right. We hope many more
they will rather,
and
and I'm hoping that. Right. I'm hoping, but they've got to.
We need to make
stop
it easier
the fear.
for them.
We've got to make it easier.
And
my story is to bring that, because if I start talking about it, there'll be other doctors that might be in hiding and saying, yeah, The and we can change and make it a law.
And change will never happen if the knowledge isn't there, and if
And
there
that's
aren't
what my
fighters
goal is.
exposing this. So
And my goal is that we need to have a better way to judge our doctors that fall outside the standard of care. We cannot just target them. We have to have certain guidelines. By the way, the Federation did put out certain guidelines. You can't find that anymore on the website. It's suddenly gone. On a scale of 1 to 100, I was 10 out of 100 to even initiate an investigation. So when there's an improper investigation, then the board loses immunity. Right now, the board has full immunity. They can do anything. They can give immunity. They give immunity to the girl that was already on the drugs. They can have full power, full total control.
wow.
Yeah. And that's the story. The story is how can you fight that system? How can you fight it?
How do you fight the system that is being backed by even a larger industry?
Yes, yeah.
The
And the
pharmaceutical
federation
industry.
that's the purpose of the story, is because the federation of the state medical boards that sets its guidelines, that's supposed to be independent, just receives checks from pharma.
Right. They are no longer independent.
That's
I think
not
that
independent.
Doctors need to hear this. Doctors need to know this. And
But
we
they
need
don't
to
think that.
challenge.
They don't believe that, and that's why they don't challenge it.
Well, more are waking up every day. I have to know that. And knowledge
So
is
I'm hoping.
power. And thank you for sharing your story, because this is very powerful and it will create change. It will plant seeds, and those seeds will eventually grow.
And that's all I want. I want people to become aware of that and the system to change.
So thank you so much.
Thank you for interviewing me.
Thank you for sharing your story and being brave and being on the front lines of change. We need this.
Thank
in
you
the
so
world.
much. Thank you, Brandy.
Thank you.
And thank you so much. Thank you guys for listening to my story. It's been 4.5 years. I finally came out with it. This is NainaMD, Beverly Hills, Fusion of Science and Beauty. And I'll see you next week for another fabulous show.